In May 1987, this hole is the only visible evidence of a skyscraper that's going to be built here over the next 2 years. Then one morning, 2 steel columns are erected as the first step in a framework that will eventually rise nearly 800 feet. The skyscraper is called Worldwide Plaza, and the story of its construction involves thousands of people and scores of companies in America and abroad. Between May and August, the 2 columns are surrounded by a complex skeleton of girders, forming the lower floors of the skyscraper, to contain 3 lobbies and an elliptical arcade. This is New York, where the pace of construction is faster than anywhere else in the world, driven by the twin pressures of time and money. If all goes well, by the end of the year, 28 stories of steel will rise from this hole, erected at a rate of 1 floor a week. A skyscraper is a handmade object. Even the crane is just an amplifying device for the movements of the operator's hand. Steel erection is a carefully choreographed collaboration between the different members of the team. The crane operator spends a lonely day high above the street, placing the pieces of steel where they're needed by the team of iron workers. The phone man for the team conducts the operation to get the right piece of steel in position. Then the rest of the team set to work to attach it to the existing framework. These are the elite of the construction industry, paid nearly £15 an hour for work that is both strenuous and dangerous. Of all the jobs on a skyscraper construction site, the one with the most glamour is the iron worker. It's not so much what he does, although that does require considerable technical skills, as where he does it. As the building rises, these men will work hundreds of feet above the ground with no safety harness. Most of us fear heights and go weak at the knees just looking at these iron workers doing their daily job. What is the secret of their skills? One clue lies in the origin of many of the team working on Worldwide Plaza. It's been a traditional feature of New York skyscraper construction over the last 80 years for American Indians to do a lot of the steel erection work. The tradition seems to have begun with the construction of this bridge in Canada. Indians used as labourers here showed themselves so adaptable at height that they became iron workers. Most of the American Indian iron workers in New York come from this reservation. Pete Markey and his father both work at Worldwide Plaza.
Amanda. Your bloody uncle gonna be mad at you. Hey, come here.
For these families, the reservation cemetery is a reminder of the dangers of their chosen profession. The grave of an iron worker who's been killed on high steel is marked with a cross of miniature steel girders. The reservation is called Kanawake and is near Montreal. The Indians, or Native Americans as they prefer to be called, are members of the Mohawk tribe. Every Friday evening, carloads of ironworkers drive for 5 hours to spend the weekend here with their families. They stay until Sunday night before driving back to New York in time for an 8 o'clock start on site. It's taken for granted that many of the children will follow their fathers up onto the high steel.
I guess it runs in their blood, I would say. You know, my father worked it, my grandfather worked it, and you know, before you already went to work, you already had an idea about it before anything you even went on the job. You've seen maybe pictures of them working and you know, things like that.
In fact, no one's really sure whether there is some genuinely unusual component in the Indians' ability to work at height. However, an observer of American Indians in 1709 did write this.
They will walk over deep brooks and creeks on the smallest poles, and that without any fear or concern. Nay, an Indian will walk on the ridge of a barn and look down the gable end, and spit upon the ground as unconcerned as if he were walking on terra firma.
As the steel framework rises, another team of ironworkers lays steel decking across the beams to form each floor of the skyscraper. It's not very strong at the moment, but when it's welded into place and covered with concrete, it'll support 50 pounds per square foot. The decking is also an important structural component of the skyscraper. The finished floors of steel and concrete will make the whole frame much more stable. In Worldwide Plaza there are to be 47 floors of office space. Though the building won't be finished for nearly 2 years, the search for tenants is well underway at the Zeckendorf Company, the main developers.
The minute steel got above the street grade, it was real, and everybody knew it was real. But the interest has been there. We really didn't go out and knock on doors per se. There were a lot of phone calls, there were a lot of proposals back and forth to various tenants, prospective tenants. And I don't want to say the deals came to us, but they sort of did.
With one tenant, the advertising agency Ogilvy & Mather, already committed to leasing the bottom 13 floors, the Zeckendorf Group still have to find tenants for another 34. One of the biggest obstacles is the location of the skyscraper on 8th Avenue, some way from Manhattan's more fashionable business districts. One of the developer's assets in selling the space is an inspirational consultant called Bob Salomon.
Look at this building and realize this is 47 stories high. It effectively is changing the entire area, I mean, as well as on 49th Street. Remember when I was at Rock Center, Time of Life building was considered too far west. People said to me, how could you go there? It's so far west. And now when you look at the Time of Life building, people can't imagine anybody ever said it was too far west. But this building, the receptivity we receive for this building is something astronomical. We've turned tenants away.
This area was formerly known as Hell's Kitchen, and the owners had always known that the location would be an obstacle in their efforts to lease the building. But they were prepared to do very attractive deals with any company willing to be pioneers in this neighborhood. One company, a major law firm with premises overlooking New York Harbor, was willing to consider taking the top 10 floors of Worldwide Plaza if the terms were right. Cravath, Swain & Moore are Manhattan's leading law firm, and they knew the building's owners were very keen to get them in.
We understood that it was a significant feather in the building's cap, and Mr. Zeckendorf's cap, if the Cravath firm would move to his building, which was a very important building, but yet was on 8th Avenue. And we let him know we understood that, and that we expected to receive a comparable benefit for ourselves in that regard.
Cravath eventually struck a very good deal with the skyscraper owners, but their future neighbours rather wished the whole project would go away.
Well, on the one hand, it's kind of interesting to see it all happening. On the other, it's a dreadful thing because the implications for this neighborhood are very dire. When this megastructure, which is actually 2 buildings, go up, and the luxury townhouses, we fear for the complexion of this community.
I believe there will be some people that Alton will have to move. There's a lot of poverty in that area, and that's an unfortunate thing. We hope that there will be some way of finding homes for these people, for the homeless or whatever. But it's going to happen. There's no question about it.
As part of a deal to get city approval for Worldwide Plaza, the Zeckendorf Company has offered to donate 132 apartments to the community. They want to spend about $6 million on some new apartments and the renovation of a number of existing ones. But the people who live here, like this resident, would have to move out while the renovation work is done. She's been offered one of the new apartments to stay in during the renovation work or to live in permanently. But she and her friends in the same building display a deeply rooted distrust of developers as they try to decide what to do.
If you want the two-bedroom apartment, you have to take the rear apartment. Jeff.
See, this here looks like your stove.
One of the representatives of Mr. Zeckendorf came around here about 3 weeks ago and gave us 2 pieces of paper to sign. It's a form just printed up by Zeckendorf's office asking us, will we vacate the premises on such and such a day. No mention of any monies, or just that he guarantees our rent will be exactly the same.
Like Mary said, if it's not really a promise just because they wrote something on paper. They would have to show us more proof, I think.
I have the inclination, like, maybe to go. Although one thing Dolores asked this representative, could we see the apartment before we move in? He says absolutely no.
He said
see? No, that's no good.
He wants us to work by these floor plans that I showed you.
I want to see how big the room is.
I know that if you're going to move in an apartment, you're going to see what you're moving into. I would never move into an apartment that I don't know what I'm moving into.
You got the same problem.
The problem is, if the local tenants don't move up for the work to be done, then the Zeckendorf company won't be able to meet their commitment to the city, and this could hold up the final approval of Worldwide Plaza for its tenants to move in. A weary Jack Schuster is dealing with the problem for the developer.
I really don't know how we're going to be able to accomplish a complete first-class renovation while there are people still in the building. We may end up by doing a cosmetic job on some of the apartments, which is really not fair to those people who are in there, since everyone else is going to be getting new kitchens and new bathrooms and new walls and new ceilings and new appliances, new everything. It would be a pity that we can't do that for everyone.
We have bathrooms. What is he going to put new bathrooms in for? When I was living in this house in 1938, the bathrooms were out in the hall. We had a tub in the kitchen. We didn't have no showers, no nothing. So in 1938, they put the new bathrooms in, sink, tub, shower, everything, and they took the tub out of the kitchen and gave us combination sinks and everything. Now what are they going to do? We already have a private bathroom.
The problem of the immovable tenants is to rumble on for the next 2 years. But in 1987, a more pressing problem blows up that sets the developers and the architects at loggerheads. It has to do with the colour of the building. The exterior of the building is to be brick, but what colour brick? Modern brickmakers can offer any shade by mixing different pigments together. This will then be sprayed onto the brick surface as a coating. Choosing the colour for Worldwide Plaza would normally be left to the architects, and because there was to be such a large area of brick, the architects had wanted the colours to be as light as possible. But during the early months of 1987, they got into an argument with the developers.
One of the owners, Victor Male, likes pink, I think in the simplest terms, and he wanted a pink building. It would be a terrible mistake to make this a pink building. It is too damn big. He needed, you know, if you look at the traditional large buildings, Metropolitan Life, the Woolworth building, the buildings at Rockefeller Center, it needs to be a light building. Victor had just got pink in his mind.
I'm a painter, among other things, and so I'm very color conscious, and I wanted this whole complex to look different than any other one in the city. And I had wanted the entire center to reflect one particular color that was available from Utah, but David, Charles, and I didn't really quite agree about it, and we compromised on a very pleasant pinkish color, which still has a lot of warmth to it.
That's a very personal concern. Everybody can take a look at a color of a piece of material and say, I like this one more than that one. And that's not an unreasonable thing for an owner to want to have a look at. I think that there have been clearly members of the team who have felt much more strongly that this ought to be a highly colorful building. From my side, I think it ought to be a quieter building in terms of its coloring. And that has been an ongoing discussion, if not debate, to a point where I think that there is generalized agreement of what would be a handsome solution.
I can understand them worrying about a shade of the red brick or the darker brick similar to this, either this color or this color here. But I find it a little ludicrous that they're worrying about this shade here versus this shade here. Okay. Now, to me and to my eye, these look the same, or not the same, but close. And once you put these in, you expose this to the New York atmosphere for 3-4 months, you cannot tell them apart. We had a big meeting here with all the architects and the owners, and they decided that they wanted a lighter shade of this top color, the lighter shade being the bottom color. Okay. So we mocked up the wall for the second time, and we reviewed the wall yesterday morning. And decisions were made that they would choose the lighter shade, which is this dark one here, and they would choose the old red color, which is this one here. So basically, the building will have these two colors.
At any one time, work for the skyscraper is taking place all over the United States and beyond. The steel, for example, is being fabricated 2,000 miles away from Manhattan in Texas. There are many thousands of people who have a hand in some small way in making the building happen. When the steel is ready, it has to be transported to the site. In April 1987, some of it is here, travelling at 5 miles an hour on a barge in the middle of the Ohio River. It may seem rather slow, but it turns out to be a very economical way to transport the steel from Texas.
Well, I would say, you know, the river transportation has always been the cheapest. And that's one thing today, it still is the cheapest, due to the amount that we can carry and the expenses. I don't see how a railroad or anybody else could just, you know, tow what we can handle.
There are to be 19,000 tons of steel in the skyscraper. In just this one barge, there are about 1,000 tons. Enough columns and beams to make 2 stories of the building. Because of the pace of manufacture and delivery, the steel is shipped a barge at a time, every couple of weeks, along with cargoes of fertilizer, lime and salt. There are 9 crew who live on the tug that drives the barges.
It's kind of a strange life. We've got our life here. Each one of them is strangers, but then again, they're part of our own family. We carry one lady on the boat, which is a cook, and it makes a big difference as far as crew-wise, their behavior. But you put a woman on the boat, and the boys, they respect her, and they deal with her, and it handles the crew a lot better.
You know, I had no idea what to expect or anything, but it's almost like being treated like a queen. They will do anything for you. They're really loving people, and they have so much respect for me. Even, I'm talking about even in their language-wise, you know, I could walk up and they would stop all their, you know.
It's a good life. It's always been good to me. You know, as far as I know, it's been good to everybody that's been out here.
While pieces of the steel framework are drifting through Ohio, a section of the skyscraper's curtain wall is being built in Florida. It's called a curtain wall because the outer skin of brick will hang like a curtain from each floor. The wall has a complex design because it has a lot of jobs to do, from supporting the windows to keeping water out and air and heat in. Every building has a different curtain wall, and the construction managers, HRH, have arranged to test a mock-up of a section of the wall to see if the multi-layer design will stand up to the extremes of weather it will face in New York. One key factor in making a curtain wall waterproof is the caulking and the flashing. rubber strips or solutions that are laid or squeezed between any gaps in the wall. The waterproofing would normally be done by a specialist contractor, but the contract hasn't yet been awarded, although the mock-up is under construction. When Dominic Fonti, the project manager, is asked what to do, he makes a spur-of-the-moment decision he is later to regret.
Actually, I would like to work it out such that the mason contractor will do everything. We'll do my through-wall flashing, we'll do my lintels, we'll do... Well, for the mock-up, I would like for him to do that. To do the caulking also? Okay, if he could do it, then I'll give him fine, then I'll give him a call and I'll arrange it. Okay.
In August 1987, the curtain wall tests are ready to run. It just so happens that Fonti and his family are on holiday in Florida, and he decides to drop in on the test to see how they're getting on. He wishes he hadn't when he meets the people conducting the tests, and finds out that things are not going at all well. The waterproofing of the mock-up seems to have gone wrong.
Yeah, I want to put some water.
There are holes in the rubber strip, as if it's been pushed into the gaps with a sharp tool. If it can't be corrected quickly, the whole series of tests due to start today will have to be postponed.
Tack 3 here now, but there's been no pre-testing or...
In addition, the masonry contractor, who is doing Fonti a favour, has waterproofed the wall with the wrong kind of sealant, and the architects have insisted that it must all be replaced. Fonti tries to decide how to correct the problems and yet keep on schedule, but he can't conceal his annoyance with the contractor who did the original work.
I'm just very annoyed at the fact that he did not bother to call me prior to doing it and tell me, Dominic, I'm going to be using this. Is this okay? Or do you want me not to do it and let someone else do it? Then I would have made the right choice. But once it's done, I got very annoyed at it.
Part of Fonti's annoyance is because he feels that the architects were being unnecessarily scrupulous in insisting that all the caulking be removed.
The difference lies in the fact that the architect feels that this is a monument to the world, whereas we think it's not a monument to the world. We think it's a masonry wall, and there have been thousands and thousands of masonry walls built in the city. And we felt that the normal standard construction would suffice, and there would be no need for this, but he has other ideas.
Frustrated by what should have been just an interesting end to his holiday, Fonti sets off to pick up his family and fly home. Meanwhile, the technicians are testing the wall to see if it's airtight. The mock-up forms the front wall of a sealed chamber, and the smoke bomb is lit inside the chamber to see if any smoke seeps out. It isn't long before the team spot one or two flaws in the wall. Later in the day, there are more visitors to the test site. The design of the wall as well as the construction method is under test, so it's important that the architects are represented. Today, two of the skyscraper engineers have arrived in Florida, together with the architect who's coordinating the wall design.
What this is practice for everybody involved with the wall, and if we see the kinds of problems that could happen in a mock-up, that tells us what to look for, where the weakness in the system is going to be as they're building the wall.
I think what Gary and I, as the engineers, concern ourselves most with or are worried about most is a structural failure of the wall during the structural test, because to me that's the most difficult to and time-consuming to get a fix on, to repair at this time.
Things continue to go badly at the site. The wall is proving more complex than expected. One of the testing engineers tries to analyze the frustration he feels.
Really, there's no one most frustrating thing. There are several. First off, people working at cross purposes. We're all trying to achieve a good building, but everybody has their own little personal things they'd like to look at. Some of them make sense, some of them don't. And the ones that don't, you've got to take time to explain why they don't. Also, you have a tendency for people to come in and say, okay, we've got a testing program that I figure should take 2 hours. So they get out of bed and get here at 10 o'clock and want us to be back on the plane at 12. Not realizing that the program actually takes more like 2 days.
For the architects, it's a first chance to see a real live portion of the building they've been designing for the past 2.5 years.
It doesn't look as bad as I thought it was going to, given that it's not a visual mock-up.
They've arrived in time to see the high-pressure water test, simulating the worst strain that Manhattan is ever likely to throw at the skyscraper.
If that's the point that we're siphoning, the cost of siphoning.
The architects can also join in the post-mortem on why the windows have leaked so much during the test.
Jack, with these leaks, I want, when you take apart this wall, I want some photographs of what happened at those corners. I want to see an autopsy on how the flashing and the sill flashing. Yeah.
In this particular building, you have a pretty characteristic group. You have the architect, whose design is his main consideration. He wants to put up a monumental building. Something everybody's going to say, hey, wow, that's great. And it's his entry into posterity, rather. The construction manager, HRH, they're interested in having a building up that they don't get sued over. It's going to stay in place. Each of the individual trades have the same interest as the construction company. The only difference is, each of them is trying to say, I'm only going to do it so much. The rest is somebody else's responsibility.
This is the final test to see if the structure of the wall will stand up in what's called a 100-year wind, the strongest wind that would be expected to blow in New York in 100 years. They use an old aircraft engine, and for once the wall passes with flying colours, bearing a pressure of 75 pounds a square foot without falling apart. But it's all too little too late. Because of the other failures, the whole mock-up will have to be taken apart, fixed and tested again. In fact, 3 months go by before the mock-up finally passes the test and the wall can begin construction. By September 1987, most of the barge loads of steel have been delivered to a marshalling yard in New Jersey and laid out in neat stacks. Each pile relates to a particular two-story section of the building, and each piece of steel has a unique number that describes its location in the framework. All through the summer and autumn, the steel has continued to rise at the rate of 1 floor a week, until by November it's reached the 18th floor.
Hello, Virginia.
Hi there.
How are you today?
Good.
Good.
What can I do for you?
Well, I'm going to give you an order for a steel delivery tomorrow.
All right.
All right.
I'm ready.
I want to bring in F columns.
All right. What time?
Division 22.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. What?
8 o'clock in the morning.
8 o'clock.
Right.
Right.
And I want to
What
bring...
street do you want that for?
That'll be on 49th Street.
Okay. I'll call
Other than
you
that?
later and let you know how many loads it'll be then.
Okay.
Very good.
Talk to you later, Virginia.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This bleak yard holds the steel for most of the skyscrapers under construction in New York. From here, every night, dozens of trucks take their loads across the various bridges onto the island of Manhattan, forbidden to take such big loads during the daytime.
I have a lot for Saturday.
We'll have a lot for Saturday.
Yeah, long time. This is for Monday.
Virginia Edelstein is the dispatcher, with the job of managing the movements of the steady stream of trucks and drivers that go out from the yard.
There's 3 loads of frame for the morning. One of them is wide. These are for the afternoon. One of them is a trailer I have to fix in the new compound. It's shipment number 5. Yeah, it just has to be straightened out. The drivers are phenomenal. half these loads you could never imagine that someone could bring into the city, into streets that are as wide as this office, to make the turns, to make the corners. 85-foot long pieces, 150,000 pounds. These guys chain these things down, and they run them just like we drive our cars through a country road. They are phenomenal, really good. Cars figure that these large tractor trailers loaded with 40,000 pounds of steel can stop on a dime. They can't. They don't sometimes realize that tractor trailer equipment requires a wide turning base, and they come right up beside them and figure they're going to make a right-hand turn and cut this truck off. There's a lot of blind spots. The people in New York City feel that that's their city. That's it. They're going to do what they're going to do, and you have to kind of look out for them.
This truck has to get to the bridge by 5 in the morning. If it's any later, it won't be allowed onto Manhattan, and steel erection at Worldwide Plaza will grind to a halt.
I joined the Marine Corps. I put several years in the Marine Corps. Went to Vietnam. I put 30 months there. During that time, I received 2 Silver Stars and a Bronze Star in Vietnam. I was undecided what I wanted to do with my life. I went to UCLA. I graduated from there. And I just wanted something other than just going to an office. And I enrolled in a seminary, St. Joseph Seminary in California. I was going to become a Catholic priest. And I put 2.5 years in the seminary. And at that time, I received a letter from home that my father was dying of cancer, and I returned to New Jersey. And then from there, a couple friends of mine were truck drivers, and they said, why don't you try driving a truck? I went out one day, guy showed me how to shift driving forward, and from then on, I've been driving a truck. It's always an adventure or a challenge, which I love. I'll accept any challenge on any kind of a job. I come in a good mood to work every day. I look forward to it. And it's just extremely, to me, I think it's just a beautiful job.
From Luxembourg to Texas, Texas to Ohio, Ohio to Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh to New Jersey, and New Jersey to Manhattan, a piece of steel called a tree column ends its journey. It's bolted to the top of the column below and will soon be locked into the framework by beams and more columns brought up from the truck in the street. At the moment, the rising skyscraper probably has 1,000 or more people working on it, although there's not much sign of them from this distance, apart from the iron workers. Felix Germano is one of the HRH superintendents, a troubleshooter for day-to-day coordination problems that crop up on the site. He's responsible for the lower floors of the skyscraper, including the arcade and the lobbies. His job is to be available to any of the dozen or more trades at work in his area, from carpenters to concrete workers, plumbers, electricians or stonemasons. He has to look out for any factor that might delay the schedule, jostling and cajoling to get the work back on target.
All right, I'll talk to him. I'll get a hold of Joe. You guys all alerted to the schedule of the pour? You guys all alerted to the new pour schedule? Yeah. You know where we're going? Yeah. You're checking everything out, you know, because we're trying to make it up on Friday. All right, as long as you guys are aware of it.
Germano trained as a hairdresser, but feels more comfortable in the world of large steel and stone spaces like the lobbies of Worldwide Plaza, one of the major architectural features of the skyscraper.
Looking at the drawings and all the specs and everything on this building, I kind of compare this building with St. Peter's Basilica, because I know there's a lot of stone there and it's beautiful. But I look at this building and I would put it on the same level with St. Peter's. Of course, we don't have the saints and everything that goes with it, but the stonework and the detail in the lobby, I certainly would compare with it.
Today there's a major problem with the pouring of the concrete floors. The whole process is being held up because some metal workers have fallen behind schedule. Each floor needs what are called deck stops to stop the concrete pouring over the edge. Dominic Fonte's boss, Artie Nussbaum, is on the scene using some gentle persuasion to get the job back on schedule.
On Saturday. It takes 4.5 days to do it. I went through the whole thing with him. When am I getting the men? Mr. Polito!
Joe, come here, Joe.
Let me just bring something into light. I don't want to be in town. No. When are we getting the soldiers to put in the deck stops?
You have 20.
I don't care about the number, but they're taking 4.5 days to do a floor. It takes only 2.5 days to do a floor up above. Obviously, there's a disparagement between the two.
Running out of sync here, baby.
Because it takes a minimum of 2.5 days to...
I know how to do that. I have a 2.5 day crew here, and I have a 2.5 day crew here, and I have a 2.5 day crew here, and I have another 2.5 day crew here. What do you know? Next thing it goes, and I get a whole floor.
I'm back to welding capacity. I got 2 generators.
I buy 2 more generators. Where is it written that I'm tied to 2 generators? I am tied. You need a floor every
Concrete is a slurry of cement, stones, gravel and water. For a job as large as Worldwide Plaza, the concrete is mixed away from the site and delivered in a never-ending stream of trucks. Concrete pouring is a process that can't be stopped once it's started. It pours steadily out of the truck, ready mixed, and is pumped up to a team of men on one of the floors above. There's an air of urgency about the process, because if the concrete were to stop flowing for any reason, it could solidify in the pipes, bringing the whole job to a halt.
This is what makes it all happen. We've been spending a lot of time on the floor. The concrete is the last step, covering everything. I love it. The momentum is here today.
The concrete is poured over the steel decking and around holes that have been cut to allow pipes to run up and down the building. There are also ducts across the floor that carry wires and pipes, and they have to be embedded in the concrete. As the floor is smoothed out, surveyors check that it's level at a depth of 5.5 inches. If the concrete is laid to the wrong depth, it will have to be smoothed down or built up after it's hardened. This was to happen on at least one of the floors in Worldwide Plaza.
Bring me another one. Bring me another generator. What can I say? Who is our friend? Who paid us? Jack Schuster and Mr. Zeckendorf.
Those are the guys that pay our bills.
Fine. Has Mr. Zeckendorf been well treated by our not pouring the 6th floor?
No.
Therefore, I want another generator.
I don't need them.
Fine. You know what? You're a hooker. You get paid. You got paid, do what you got paid to do. You got paid to spread your legs, spread your legs.
I did.
No, you didn't. Bring another generator on the job. Bring more soldiers on the job. Are you well compensated? You like the tickets we're signing?
I'm not well compensated. I wish they weren't even there.
Fine, but meanwhile they are. So please, bring the machinery.
I have to talk to them. I don't want to...
A year after groundbreaking, the project team is under a lot of pressure. The steel and concrete should soon be followed by the construction of the curtain wall. But there's no sign of the bricks, which in the original schedule should be on site by now. In fact, the architects haven't even seen the final samples.
We have requested that the brick for our job be submitted to us because we still have not gotten the final approved samples.
The understanding we had was that when the first kill of brick came out, the architect would be invited to go over. When is that going to happen?
That's the same. That's the same. I called Glengarry directly and tried to plan a trip with the architects as when it's a good time to go. So don't bother coming now. We postponed you another 2 weeks until first week in December. I says, why? Says, well, this is we came around the job, we looked, and we felt that we could use 2 more weeks to expedite some of our more urgent customers.
The bricks for Worldwide Plaza start life here in the clay dust from a quarry in Pennsylvania, owned by a company called Glengarry. The relationship between Glengarry and HRH is about to bedevil the smooth schedule of the skyscraper. The clay dust is mixed with water and extruded in a long rectangular strip before being cut into the extra large size bricks that the architects have ordered. Under this hood, the bricks are sprayed with a contentious coloured coating that has caused such heartache. Glengarry are making nearly 1.25 million bricks for Worldwide Plaza, and 29,000 of them are being shaped by hand. There are over 50 different shapes as a result of the intricate decorative features designed for the wall by the architects. With a care whose results will be seen only by pigeons and window cleaners, the bricks are smoothed and holes drilled to allow for even drying and baking. These bricks cost about £2 a piece, compared with the standard bricks for the skyscraper, which will sell for about £250 a thousand. At this stage, the clay is still moist and fairly soft. The bricks now have to be hardened by drying and baking in a kiln. The kiln is about 500 feet long, and the bricks move slowly through it, taking about 30 hours to go from one end to the other. The 2,000-degree heat produces chemical changes in the pigment, and the bricks come out of the kiln a different colour from when they went in. There's one final process before the bricks can be shipped to the site. Because each batch may have a slightly different shade, the batches are mingled, so that the bricklayer gets a mixture of shades instead of laying one whole batch next to another and producing a patchy appearance. For Glengarry, this Worldwide Plaza contract was just one of a number of projects they were working on, so they didn't have the same sense of urgency as HRH about getting bricks to the site.
Dominic's first statement to us, or Arnold Kriegel's first statement to us, was September 1st. When Dominic Fonte got involved, it changed a little bit to October 1st. At that point in time, there was very little construction going on the site. We've been in the business for a long time. Our salesmen have been in the business for a long time. We know about how fast projects go up. We knew for a fact they could not possibly require brick physically on that site so that the mason could start laying it prior to November. It was an impossibility, regardless of how many people they put on there, how fast the steel went up, or anything else. They could not use the brick faster than that. There was one time in Dominic Fonte's office where he had a CPN on the wall, and he kept saying, "I need brick at the beginning of October." I said, Dominic, right behind you, your bar graph says you need it mid-November. I said, why are you telling me you need it in October? I said, well, that's wrong, ignore it. I said, okay, fine. Look out the window, Dominic. When do you need brick? Well, probably mid-November is okay.
I don't consider it against my religion that he has the brick a week or two early, and that we put up the hoist, which we expect to start next week, and start lifting the brick to the floor. It's very hard to get a contractor going when there isn't a pile of material sitting there in front of him. What will you do if you have 100 bricklayers on the job and Glengarry screws up? Say, I'm sorry. So the contractor says, put it here. As they say in my language, tukasa from tish. Bring it.
Mr. Steve George should not really care, or any vendor or any supplier should not really care what the status of the building is. Okay? That's not his job. His job is not to determine whether or not we need the brick and when we need the brick. It's strictly there that we tell him when we need the brick. Okay? He's strictly a vendor to our subcontractor. We directed our subcontractor to get brick here November 15th. We wrote several letters. We confirmed with him November 15th. Okay? And just by coincidence, I happened to talk to Steve George on Friday, and tells me, by the way, says, I hear reports from the job that you're really not ready to get the brick here. And I says, well, who are you to determine that I'm not ready? I want the brick, I will pay for the brick, and I will receive the brick. Just bring it to the job.
But it was not to be. November passed, December arrived, and there were still no bricks on site. And perhaps Steve George was right. The floors were not really ready for the bricks, although the steel was rising on schedule, and in mid-December had reached the 26th floor, half the height of the building. In a place as confined as Manhattan, the cranes that lift the steel and other heavy materials are often placed on top of the structure they're supplying. The building then grows around the crane tower until it reaches the height of the cab. And the tower of the crane is then raised in a manoeuvre called jumping the crane to allow more floors to be built around it. Each of the cranes is resting on top of a blue steel tower that at the moment has its feet attached to the steel 4 floors below. Today's task is to pull the foot of the tower up and reattach it to a higher part of the steel framework. Then, using a hydraulic jack, the whole crane will be lifted to its new height. As the crane rises, the feet of the tower are readjusted to rest on the higher floors of the steel skeleton. During the morning, the 2 cranes are raised to the height of the 30th floor, ready for the next phase of steel erection. The erectors will now build the framework up around the tower at a rate of 1 floor a week until it's time to jump the cranes again. It's Christmas 1987, and this year has really been focused on the activities of the construction team, HRH and the various subcontractors. As they gather for the HRH Christmas party, they can take some pride in the growing structure that is now a substantial and visible part of Manhattan. Of course, 1987 hasn't been without its problems. Although the steel has gone up smoothly, the curtain wall didn't eventually pass its test until November, 3 months late, and the brick still isn't on site 3 months after Dominic Fonte asked for it, although he now hopes to start bricklaying in January. With the pressure off for a few days, however, the management team can relax and unbend a little.
The morale of the people mostly. You know, we have feelings also. We have to acknowledge the fact to the people working for us that we're not as cold as we appear to be during the year. You know, we're only human. We're straight-laced. You know, we got to get the job done. We push. And they think sometimes we have ice water in our blood, you know? Tony, our leader, keeps pounding us every day. We keep pounding the trades, and it moves along. What they have to do is feel the momentum. If they can feel us and how we feel, they'll get the same feeling and push it in.
And the job right now, structural steel is on 28. We have concrete on the 17th floor. We're in the process of starting our masonry operation, which is another main step in the construction of this particular project. And we're right on schedule.
In the next few months, work should start on the exterior stone and the roof. But the group at the party had no inkling of the major problems they and the owners would face in 1988. To spend the weekend here with their families. They stay until Sunday night before driving back to New York in time for an 8 o'clock start on site. It's taken for granted that many of the children will follow their fathers up onto the high steel.
I guess it runs in their blood, I would say. You know, my father worked it, my grandfather worked it, and you know, before you already went to work, you already had an idea about it before anything, you even went on the job. You've seen maybe pictures of them working and, you know, things like that.
In fact, no one's really sure whether there is some genuinely unusual component in the Indians' ability to work at height. However, an observer of American Indians in 1709 did write this.
They will walk over deep brooks and creeks on the smallest poles, and that without any fear or concern. Nay, an Indian will walk on the ridge of a barn and look down the gable end, and spit upon the ground as unconcerned as if he were walking on terra firma.
As the steel framework rises, another team of iron workers lays steel decking across the beams to form each floor of the skyscraper. It's not very strong at the moment, but when it's welded into place and covered with concrete, it'll support 50. These men will work hundreds of feet above the ground with no safety harness. Most of us fear heights and go weak at the knees just looking at these iron workers doing their daily job. What is the secret of their skills? One clue lies in the origin of many of the team working on Worldwide Plaza. It's been a traditional feature of New York skyscraper construction over the last 80 years for American Indians to do a lot of the steel erection work. The tradition seems to have begun with the construction of this bridge in Canada. Indians used as labourers here showed themselves so adaptable at height that they became iron workers. Most of the American Indian iron workers in New York come from this reservation. Pete Markey and his father both work at Worldwide Plaza.
Amanda. Your bloody uncle gonna be mad at you.
Hey, come here.
For these families, the reservation cemetery is a reminder of the dangers of their chosen profession. The grave of an iron worker who's been killed on high steel is marked with a cross of miniature steel girders. The reservation is called Kanawake and is near Montreal. The Indians, or Native Americans as they prefer to be called, are members of the Mohawk tribe. Every Friday evening, carloads of ironworkers drive for 5 hours, £8 per square foot. The decking is also an important structural component of the skyscraper. The finished floors of steel and concrete will make the whole frame much more stable. In Worldwide Plaza there are to be 47 floors of office space. Though the building won't be finished for nearly 2 years, the search for tenants is well underway at the Zeckendorf company, the main developers.
The minute steel got above the street grade, it was real, and everybody knew it was real. But the interest has been there. We really didn't go out and knock on doors per se. There were a lot of phone calls, there were a lot of proposals back and forth to various tenants, prospective tenants. And I don't want to say the deals came to us, but they sort of did.
With one tenant, the advertising agency Ogilvy & Mather, already committed to leasing the bottom 13 floors, the Zeckendorf Group still have to find tenants for another 34. One of the biggest obstacles is the location of the skyscraper on 8th Avenue, some way from Manhattan's more fashionable business districts. One of the developer's assets in selling the space is an inspirational consultant called Bob Salomon.
Look at this building and realize this is 47 stories high. It effectively is changing the entire area. I mean,
In May 1987, this hole is the only visible evidence of a skyscraper that's going to be built here over the next 2 years. Then, one morning, 2 steel columns are erected as the first step in a framework that will eventually rise nearly 800 feet. The skyscraper is called Worldwide Plaza, and the story of its construction involves thousands of people and scores of companies in America and abroad. Between May and August, the 2 columns are surrounded by a complex skeleton of girders, forming the lower floors of the skyscraper, to contain 3 lobbies and an elliptical arcade. This is New York, where the pace of construction is faster than anywhere else in the world, driven by the twin pressures of time and money. If all goes well, by the end of the year, 28 stories of steel will rise from this hole, erected at a rate of 1 floor a week. A skyscraper is a handmade object. Even the crane is just an amplifying device for the movements of the operator's hand. Steel erection is a carefully choreographed collaboration between the different members of the team. The crane operator spends a lonely day high above the street, placing the pieces of steel where they're needed by the team of iron workers. The phone man for the team conducts the operation to get the right piece of steel in position. Then the rest of the team set to work to attach it to the existing framework. These are the elite of the construction industry, paid nearly £15 an hour for work that is both strenuous and dangerous. Of all the jobs on a skyscraper construction site, the one with the most glamour is the iron worker. It's not so much what he does, although that does require considerable technical skills, as where he does it. As the building rises,